happened when love has taken hold and it won't let go of us now.
Something here is calling us forward, upward motion. We're drops in one ocean, roll on.
Will you rise up with me today? Lift up your voice
And boldly say,
we are the ones we've been waiting for. Live the dream of your highest calling, be the hope of a new day dawning. We're the ones who can make a difference. Let's stand together, sharing gifts for the world that's waiting for a change that we're all creating. It's the
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, September New Thought on the News, with our regular co-host, Jim Kenny, and also tonight, AG&T leaders, Michelle Medrano and Reverend Deborah Johnson. We'll introduce everybody in just a second. And I'm Barbara Fields, Executive Director of the Association for Global New Thought. We're up here in Sacramento we've had a week of meetings with the AG&T Leadership Council. We had a great rally at the Unity Church in Sacramento last night. We were all wonderful, if we don't say so ourselves. I can hear you, Jim. You're not muted. That's okay. So tonight our topic is we're going to discuss the 5 guiding principles. There's a motorcycle outside the window. The 5 guiding principles for evolutionary citizenship. Obviously, we're all aware that we're getting close to these midterm elections, and that New Thought people and the people attending this webinar, and also the many more people who will be watching it as a recording afterward, understand that we need a new narrative for what citizenship is and what is our responsibility for voting in this probably most important election in my lifetime. And we said that last time, right? And that's why it's the most important, obviously. So the 5 guiding principles for evolutionary citizenship come from a larger body of principles, 12, which Jim will get into in just a moment, from his book, which we have been referring to ever since this series started last January, Thriving in the Cross-Current, Clarity and Hope in a Time of Cultural Sea Change. So in order just to get started, I'm going to ask one of my minister colleagues to offer an opening blessing. And I'm sorry we forgot to discuss who might want to do that, but I'm looking for volunteers.
I'll be happy to do it. Okay. Well, let's just take a moment to breathe in the very, very presence of this now moment and allow ourselves to feel that sinking down into a deeper awareness below the surface of the activity of our daily life. We just allow our awareness to embrace that depth of beingness that we know is the truth of us. And in that we can feel and sense that there is a divine presence, a divine power, a divine light that is expressing itself in, through, and as all of creation, that is inclusive of everything and everyone and every activity and every moment. And that in this moment, we not only remind ourselves of this truth, but we remind ourselves that which it is, we are. And we breathe into this wonderful opportunity to remember this truth, to bring this awareness to bear upon this time that we share together. And I trust and affirm that from this brief moment of just being still, we feel the centeredness calling upon us. We feel the centeredness breathing through us. We feel the centeredness having its way through our body temple, through our mind, our heart, our soul, and recognize that we simply are this very presence. And that as we step forward into this time, I accept and affirm that every moment we share together is truly blessed, that there is great wisdom that pours forth. I give thanks for each participant in this beautiful webinar. I give thanks for the energy that has brought us together. I trust and affirm from this divine power and presence that we are the perfect people to be right here and right now. And this conversation forwards the momentum of this wonderful topic and allows each one of us to continue to feel a deeper, deeper peace and well-being as we walk together into this collective experience we call being alive, being human, being on earth. We are so blessed. I accept this, I affirm this, I give thanks for this right now, and I release this word into the action of that universal law, letting it go and letting it be. It is done, and so it is. Amen.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, for those of you who don't know Jim Kenny, you're missing out. He is co-founder and executive director of Common Ground, an adult educational organization and study center. He's author of Thriving in the Cross Current, Clarity and Hope in a Time of Cultural Sea Change, and founding trustee of the International Committee for the Peace Council, also project coordinator, bringing together influential religious and spiritual leaders to serve world peace. Jim is co-editor of Interreligious Insight, a wonderful journal that can be found online, I believe, and I'll get you some information about that after the broadcast. He's also former founding trustee and global director for, of a Council for a Parliament of the World's Religions. Reverend Deborah Johnson is the founder of Inner Light Ministries, an omni-faith spiritual community in Santa Cruz, California, and the Motivational Institute, an organizational development consulting firm specializing in cultural diversity. A dynamic organizer, strategist, facilitator, public speaker, spoken word artist, and all-around good person. She is known for her ability to bring clarity to complex and emotionally charged issues. Heaven knows we could use a little more of that now.
Definitely.
Reverend Dr. Michelle Medrano found religious science at age 15. Upon walking into Mile High Church of Religious Science in Denver, Colorado, she knew she was home. As a teenager, Michelle started volunteering at the church and eventually joined as administrative staff, where she worked for 6 years. She continued her studies, became a practitioner, and in 1991, after receiving her degree from Ernest Holmes College, became a minister. There's a lot more to say about all of these people, but let's get into tonight's discussion. Mm-hmm. What we're going to do is we're going to start off with a very short video that was produced by Mile High Church right before the 2016 election. It still holds up pretty well now, and let's watch the video and then launch into our discussion for this evening.
Your voice and your vote count.
Your voice is strong.
Your voice is love.
Love.
Am I doing it right?
Sometimes on our spiritual path, we can become disenchanted.
Disenchanted.
And choose not to participate in the politics of our time.
One way to inspire your participation
is to have ministers.
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 And then some more ministers.
Reverends.
Doctors.
Almost too many ministers.
And one random guy.
Let's remember that one of the ways we vote is the way we are being.
Are you leaning out?
Or are you leaning in?
Is there too much drama?
Too much noise?
Too much divisiveness?
Do you wish you were Canadian?
I'm a Canadian, and I want to encourage you to vote. Your election of your president is more impactful on my country than the election of our own prime minister.
Remember that just as
every vote counts
in the outcome of an election,
every opinion we cast into the debate
has a ripple effect.
Ripple effect.
Ripple effect.
If we lob anger, bitterness, and hatred towards others,
we create strife and stress.
on Facebook.
If we respond with respect and open-mindedness,
we contribute to a public discussion that is more thoughtful and clear.
Treat others as you would have them treat you.
And speak to others as you would have them speak to you.
I prefer to be spoken to in a whisper.
There doesn't have to be animosity, spite, bitterness,
justice, and revenge.
If we disagree with each other,
there can be consideration and respect that opens the collective thought to what is doable.
and to what serves the collective good.
Participate
Participate in the public debate with love,
honor, and with respect.
and consideration.
It makes all the difference.
As we work to achieve oneness,
Oneness.
We must engage with one another.
As a community and as a nation.
This vote is about the world itself.
As members of an awakening community and nation,
It's our time.
It's our time to lean in with open eyes
And open hearts.
To the messy, chaotic,
Yet important work of democracy.
Your engagement and your vote matter more now than ever.
this is the time that calls each of us to express the truth of our oneness.
Vote.
Okay, so that was inspiring. So now let's draw back into a framework for this conversation. And I'm going to ask Jim to start off by framing the conversation on evolutionary citizenship in the context of his 5 guiding principles, and he'll say more about that. Oops, hold on a second here.
I'm so glad that you're here this morning. So glad that I'm here this morning. Such an honor to get to share with you. You know, in the Gospels, when anyone approaches Jesus for healing, or if they're wondering how to heal someone else, Jesus always says to them something like, "You believe."
Your voice and your vote count.
Your voice is strong.
Your voice is love.
There you go. Stop share. Okay. I'm terribly sorry about that technical glitch. Okay, so Jim, can I ask you to go ahead and frame the conversation and get started?
Sure. My book, Thriving in the Crosscurrent, ends, the very last chapter is based on 12 guiding principles. Not sure why I picked the number 12. It just seems to turn up. Everything is 12 steps. And they sort of emerged rather naturally. I'm not going to take you through the 12, but Barbara and I talked about it, and I've chosen 5 of them that seem to be particularly relevant to the overarching theme tonight, which is voting. Why should I vote, and what is voting? Let me just add, as I wind up this little short intro, that voting needs to be understood as a constant thing. I'm always voting. I loved the bit in the video, which was very cool, but where I think it might have been Roger who said, whether you're leaning in or leaning out, something like that. And my vote is my intentionality. The vote lives inside me. It's always evolving, taking shape. It influences my relationships. It influences my place in the world. It influences and helps to shape my learning. What I thirst to understand, chances are that's growing at least in part out of this developing, complex, growing, emerging intentionality that is my living capacity to choose to vote. So it's not just what, of course it's important that I stand in line and I get in that little booth and try not to knock it over and cast my ballot, but that's not the only time or the only way that I vote. So a wonderful question that we should all ask ourselves periodically, quite frequently, is how am I voting now? Which is a way of saying, what's my intentionality? How am I tending? What kind of person am I tending to be right now? And what kind of world am I hoping for? So that'll do.
Great. Okay. Well, that's a good foundation. And so I would like to move right into the first principle, which you call say yay, with an exclamation point. Do you want me to read that, or do you want to do that?
No, I'm just going to talk about it. Say yay. First of all, it's not yay, Y-A-Y. which is also a word I like. But this one is Y-E-A as opposed to N-A-Y. And in the book, I spend a fair amount of time talking all the way through the book about the difference between being a yay-sayer and a naysayer in the face of cultural evolution. Either you believe that it's a very controversial idea, by the way, that cultures get progressively, in a sense, better. But my idea of cultural evolution is that our dominant values move steadily and surely in the direction of a closer fit with reality. So gradually it dawns on us, slowly but surely, it dawns on us that slavery was always and everywhere wrong. It dawns on us that patriarchy, the idea of the innate superiority of men, never made that much sense, and certainly makes virtually none at all today. The old idea that the earth is unfragile and that nothing human beings can possibly do to it can matter in the long run. Those ideas are all, we're discovering that they are bankrupt. And so there are those who hear the idea of cultural evolutionary sea change, which simply means there's an older set of values that's moving. I'm trying to sketch a wave in the air here, but I have a tiny screen. An older wave of values that's moving out of influence, and a newer wave that's rising and coming in. A lot of people simply reject that out of hand. They are naysayers. They tend to be life's couch potatoes. I often refer to a group that I call the unenlightened lifers, because not only are they not interested in anything that would bring light into their lives, but they're serving a life sentence at it. They're the couch potatoes of life. A more dangerous group are those who find their identity challenged by these value shifts. You can imagine the people that are deeply challenged by the decline of patriarchy or the decline of ecological degradation. And so this is a group I call the militants. And these are people that are deeply angry about the change and want to fight back. And then, of course, there are the circling buccaneers and vultures and so on that aren't deeply grounded in any beliefs, but are concerned about their own wealth and power. And they're very good at manipulating the militants and manipulating the couch potatoes. So that's the crowd that I call the naysayers. And we all know all the different reasons for being a yay-sayer. Maybe it's because I'm a spiritual seeker. Maybe it's because I'm persuaded of the importance of interdependence. Maybe it's because I want to be a catalyst and help others evolve. But I think the most important thing is to say yay. And I'll just say one more thing. How you feel about living in a time of cultural sea change where the older wave on the way out is crossed by and crossing the newer wave on the way in. What would it be like to live at a moment in time where those two were roughly equal in influence? Well, it would be like right now, because that's where we are, that's where we live, and how you feel about it when you get up in the morning depends on whether you feel like you're riding the old wave out or the new wave in. So that's why I say the first step is to say, yay, cultural evolution is real, I'm evolving, and I'm going to be a catalyst.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's provocative. So I'm just going to ask first Reverend Deborah and then Reverend Michelle just to make some comments, just impressions based on what you just laid out, and basically think about the idea of voting and citizenship right now in this upcoming election, and how can we help or advise people to cultivate the habit of saying yes to cultural evolution at this very critical juncture in a very practical way. So, Reverend Deborah, I'm going to ask you to take the first pass at that.
Well, thank you, and welcome everyone. It is true that our every thought is a vote. We are constantly making choices with our thinking, with our attitudes, with the things that we say, the things that we do, the things that are moving us and influencing us all the time. that this vote with our every action of our being empowers. It makes things multiply. It makes things grow. It's absolutely impossible for us to be uncreative beings because every time we do anything, there is a response. So I think the question for us is not when am I going to say yes or if I'm going to say yes, but what is it that I'm saying yes to? I'm constantly saying yes to something. Am I saying yes to chaos? Am I saying yes to old paradigms? Am I saying yes to things that I don't even want to see anymore, but because I keep affirming that that's the way that it is, that I can't get out of it? Or am I saying yes to newness? Am I saying yes to possibility? Am I saying yes to creative expression and to there being a better or a brighter way? Yes, the mark of the moral universe is long, but it does bend towards justice. Everything always bends towards equilibrium and balance and healing. And when we say yes to that, then we help to create the space for nature to be able to grow and to transform and to redeem itself over and over and over again.
Yeah, thank you. Reverend Michelle.
Well, I really am, welcome everybody. I'm really loving this conversation. I heard a pundit say recently, he was joking about how there are a lot of people who spend more time on their devices looking at Yelp, deciding what restaurant to go to, than spend time looking at what to vote for in the world of voting. And it really struck a nerve for me. It's really caused me to think a lot about that. And I agree with everything that you've both said about we're voting all the time with our creative energy, with everything we do, with our dollars, with every action. And it strikes me that a lot of people, even metaphysical type people, have forgotten this. They're not seeing it in this context that we're talking about, and have abdicated their power, abdicated their awareness of this, mostly out of discouragement. This feeling like my vote doesn't matter. No matter what I do, my vote doesn't matter. It's all falling apart, and it's going to keep falling apart, and there's nothing I can do about it. And in a way, it's kind of an interesting conundrum, because in the evolutionary journey, and I'd love to hear more, Jim, from you about evolution itself. I was saying the other night in the bus when we were driving that my experience of my own evolution and evolution as a whole is that things break down before they break up. And, before they rise up, there's often a breakdown in the energy, a breakdown, a falling apart almost, so that something new can rise forth. And it feels to me like we're in that time, but in this time of evolution that to some feels like it's a lot of breakdowns and a lot of disconnect and a lot of divisiveness and polarity, people feel discouraged. And so it feels like rather than engage and lean in, they lean out, they step away. I'll just wait till it all calms down and then I will pay more attention. And I think that this kind of a conversation can invite us all to say, no matter how bad it gets, no matter how discouraged you get, you are a part of the journey in ways you can't even see. And that's important for us to remember.
Hi, Jim, do you want to make a follow-up, or did you want to move on to number 2?
Just a quick follow-up. When Deborah said, what am I saying yes to? It's such a good question. And the answer from the context of cultural evolution, as I understand it, is just a short nutshell kind of thing, is I'm saying yes to peace and the possibility of nonviolent conflict resolution. I'm saying yes to justice, social and economic justice, and universal human rights. And I'm saying yes to ecological sustainability. So as we vote, is the vote I'm about to cast at whatever level, is it a vote for peace, justice, and sustainability? Or is it somehow the opposite of that? I think it's going to be extremely clear to us in these elections, the kinds of choices we're facing, and the things that we have the possibility of saying yes to.
Yeah, so let's lead right into the next principle, which you refer to as embrace complexity and interdependence. So let's move on to that, because that's the perfect segue now to the next point.
Well, this is a key to my whole idea of what is cultural evolution. Well, a test, this is one of the benchmarks. I talk about benchmarks of cultural evolution. As you see something happening in the world around you, is it evolutionary or is it just happenstance? Is this something that really will make a difference in the future, or did it just happen? And I think one of the real tests is, does what happened, does the step that is unfolding that I think might be evolutionary, does it somehow increase complexity? Does it make the world and my experience more complex? I'll tell you, whenever I bring this up, there's always somebody in the group who will say, I don't want my life to be any more complex. And my answer is, oh, yes, you do. You don't want your life to be more complicated, but you do want your life to be more complex. And I've been using this metaphor forever. Barbara, I have to apologize because you've heard it about 11,000 times. But a tangle of band instruments in a high school outside the band practice room, that's complicated. But when those instruments are picked up and played and a symphony emerges, that's complex. And increasing complexity is always involved in a deeper and broader and greater experience of beauty and so on. To be a voting person means you need to be informed, and that's hard. I hear from people all the time, I'm sure you do, it's too much work. There's too many people, too many issues, I don't know what to make of it all. No, it is a challenge. It's a challenge of what sort? It's a challenge to embrace complexity and to start to remember that, as you all know so well, that every step I take, every move I make, every step is involved with every other. Every thought, word, deed ties in with and influences and is influenced by every other. We live in an interdependent universe, and I think future historians are going to look back at our time and they're going to say, that's when they rediscovered the reality of interdependence and what that meant. We discovered it first with health, the rediscovering the mind-body connection. Can you imagine that we ever forgot it? But we forgot it completely. It was dead gone. And the rediscovery of the reality of ecology or social justice. All of these involve the appreciation of interdependence and complexity. And so if I want to be thoughtful, if I want to move through my life with an evolving, emerging vote or set of choices, I need to embrace complexity and interdependence. That's a really good test when you say, how am I doing? How's my complexity? How's my embrace of interdependence?
Wow, well said. Okay, a little more to think about. Reverend Deborah, would you like to take a shot at this one?
Well, yes, it's definitely true. I couldn't detect our microphone.
No, it's okay.
Oh, it's definitely true. It's a sign of maturation that when you're 5 years old, there's only so much that you can comprehend. There's only so much that you care about. When you're 15, you can see the world in broader ways. You realize that everything's not just about you. The more that we grow and the more that we learn, the more that we can see that life really is interdependent. Even if the bees are gone, that's going to make a big difference. There is a way that everything is in fact connected. And that ability to see ourselves as part of the connection is vital. That we're not just bystanders to life, where everything is happening to us or everything is happening at us, that we are part of that dynamic piece and the world needs us, that we are part of that complexity. Our unique position, our unique contributions, our unique gifts are part of the mix. This idea that we vote and there's the complexity, that if we're not casting our vote, it doesn't mean that a vote's not being made. We essentially are giving proxy to someone else. We're giving proxy to something else. So if I'm not participating in what it is that I eat, or what's available to my children in the future, what kind of educational systems that they're going to be, if I'm not the one who's somehow in the mix of that, then I am acquiescing and letting somebody else make those critical decisions for my life. And I think in the long run, all of us want to have some sort of sense of agency and not feel like we are the victim of external forces. But when we don't choose to take action, that's what winds up happening. We wind up feeling like we've been victimized by things as opposed to feeling like we're co-creative.
Wow, yeah. Reverend Michelle.
Well, and I love your example of the band instruments and the difference between, complicated and how that comes together. And I feel like in that discouragement, people disconnect in ways that don't work. Interconnectedness means, to me, we're better together. We're just better together. And so the more I stay in tune and the more I understand that my everyday I have a chance to connect and contribute to life in a meaningful way, even the things that appear to be going on way far away from me that are so discouraging. You've got somebody who's made a comment about this, and I can tell through this comment is feeling discouraged by the process, which I totally understand. And it's about, for me, seeing what's going on and what appears to be over there, recognizing that I am a part of that too, and I do have an opportunity to contribute in meaningful and powerful ways every single day. But the just disconnecting and being discouraged and disgruntled by it isn't going to serve the process and the evolution in the direction that I want it to. But I see people, like I was saying earlier, just completely disconnecting, thinking that's the only answer. And so I'm really looking forward to continuing the conversation, because I think you've got some great things to help encourage and uplift us here, and we can have a conversation like that.
So, oops. So Jim, did you want to follow up on that or move on?
No, I'm good. Move on.
Okay.
Great. I loved what both of you said.
I love the combination of the three of you thinking together. I have to say, this is very compelling for me to listen to. I think this is going to be an enjoyable recording for our people afterward. We'll make good use of it. So the third principle, which I really love, because it's bringing back a well-known concept to our community, but I think we need some reinterpretation and reinvigoration of this concept at this time. And the way that you phrase it is, we need to facilitate conscious evolution. So why don't you say a little bit more about that?
And I thought I would do that by reading just a little bit of what I wrote here. Not every individual, and this fits with what you were saying in the video about, is there a way we can come together and exchange without berating the other, without falling into the hate trap and so on. I do want to say before I get into this that I think it's perfectly sound and perfectly reasonable to dismiss ideas that are dead wrong. I don't feel that I'm called upon to respect the denial of science. I don't have any respect for that. That's wrong-headed. But I think it's still possible to understand what moves someone to so mistrust and distrust both science that he or she might be capable of that kind of denial. The denial is wrong, and it's often purely goofy. But it's the old idea of hate the sin and somehow try to love the sinner. Not always easy. Anyway, what I wrote here is, not every individual or culture occupies the same evolutionary level. Yet everyone participates in the evolutionary ascent. The greatest obligation borne by those who realize the powerful and precious character of our time is to assist the process of cultural evolution. Now, it's very difficult to write about this without seeming smug, superior, supercilious, arrogant, and generally obnoxious. So I tried to avoid that and say, look, if you realize that we live in a time in which that is rich with possibility, something's happening. Older values are declining in influence, challenged by the anomalies that build up in their wake, things that don't make any sense. If you're energized by the aha experiences that build up in your life, that call your attention to the possibility of growth and evolution and so on, then you have a responsibility. And that means not that you go around instructing the benighted others who don't get what you think you get. It's not that at all. But that you make your choices in such a way as to make your little tiny corner of the world a place where it's rather more instead of less likely that the others with whom you interact are going to have aha experiences of their own. So how do we do that? Barbara Marx Hubbard happens to be one of the most articulate people in talking about the whole business of conscious evolution. Being aware that evolution is underway, accepting my conscious participation in it, and accepting it not as the gift of my great insight to the world, but as a burden, not a burden, a challenge that I willingly accept. A challenge to be not a teacher, not a savant, but a facilitator. Somebody who by her presence or by his presence maybe, possibly, makes it a little more likely that the next person we interact with is going to be moved in a constructive way. So that's facilitating. And, I'll just say one more thing. All of these have to do with how I see myself. When I wake up in the morning, what do I think my job is? Well, if some little part of me says one of your jobs is to be a facilitator of conscious evolution, who knows how many times during the day that thought, that inspiration may just pop up. And it may occasionally just pop up at absolutely the right time.
I couldn't have said that better myself. So I'm going to ask Reverend Deborah to start. So this is a question now. This is a question at this point of asking my colleagues to comment on what you just said, remembering that you're both in positions of teaching or mentorship or guidance. And so as we approach this critical election and this notion of ongoing voting with ongoing consciousness and the choices that we make every day, so how do you perceive your own role moving forward into the next month and a half of time when you're encountering people who are going to be all over the map emotionally and intellectually about this upcoming opportunity, in light of what Jim just laid out for facilitating conscious evolution? So you basically motivate people to transform without trying to fix them or give them the answer or make their choices for them. So Reverend Deborah, if you would like to begin.
Yes, I would like to make this simple, as simple as I can. I think most people inherently want to feel like their life matters, that somehow or another they make a difference, that somehow or another they're making a contribution. I think that most people care about that legacy. And where you can really see it is in child rearing and having families, and how every parent wants for their children a little bit more than what they had for themselves. There's always this sense of forward motion that no matter what it is that I've done or no matter what it is that I've had, I want my children to have at least that much and more. And I think it's as simple as that, that there's certain something within us, and there's a way in which, unfortunately, we equate simplicity with safety. So we'll get into, I only care about me and mine, and it's just my family, and it's just my church, and it's just my religion, and it's just my neighborhood, it's just my country, and it's just mine, as though there isn't room enough to have that same kind of drive or wish for progress for everybody and everything. And what I know is that no matter how bad things get, parents never start wanting less for their children. I don't care how bad it gets. They never start wanting less. There isn't enough discouragement in the world that in their heart will make them want less. And I think that's where we need to be in the political arena and the political front. Whatever that is within us that says, I still want my legacy, I still want my children, I still want them to have something better, no matter what's going on, is the place where we have to stand about everything.
Can I get an amen?
Amen, sister.
Thank you.
That's beautiful. For me, what resonates for me in this conversation is that I was serving a community that was in a really conservative part of the world, and I tend to be a little more of a moderate politically. And I discovered very early on that as a minister and as a person who wants to be a global citizen, that it was vital for me to watch the parts of me that try to disenfranchise people who don't believe what I believe, even the challenging ones, like you mentioned, people who don't believe in science, which seems to me very silly, but it really, it fueled me to say, if I really believe in oneness and interconnectedness, I need to be able to feel that resistance in me to other people's viewpoints, and to then ferret out where I might be doing this to people, and recognize that I serve people of all walks of life and all beliefs. And so I really began a number of years ago to invite myself to become more educated, even in opposing views and opposing ideas that I don't necessarily believe in, ideas that I don't necessarily resonate in. And what I found in that is that it is just what we're saying is that what you just said, Deborah, is most people really do want to make a difference, and they really do want to have a good life, and they don't always know how to create that, and I don't always agree with them. But even in disagreeing with people and not having the same viewpoints with people, I can create within myself a sense of connectedness. And that part of my work as a minister calls me as a spiritual leader to do everything I can to create connectedness. And I found that that makes me a better citizen. It makes me a more thoughtful voter, and it makes me rise above the din of you're right, I'm wrong, you're right, I'm wrong, you're stupid, you're great, you're smart, you're right, into a place that feels bigger and broader, and still be able to say, I don't really agree with that viewpoint, but not do it with such animosity and such anger and such polarity. And that serves me, and it has served me in having conversations with people that feel more forward moving and more peaceful. And to me, that's got to be part of how I tend to my little corner of the world, as you were saying, Jim, is that in my corner of the world, I want to be welcoming, even of viewpoints that I don't agree with. And I want to also be challenging people as a spiritual leader from our principles. If I came across someone who is very patriarchal or is very racial, I still don't have a problem lovingly challenging them to consider those viewpoints from these spiritual principles, but I don't feel the need to reject them, push them away. I want to pull them in to a conversation where I can help maybe people see things a little bit differently. So that's kind of how I've seen this. That, for me, is evolution too.
So I think that we've come we've come to principle number 4. And as Michelle just mentioned a minute ago, she started off her remarks by saying in her effort to become a global citizen. And guess what? Your principle number 4 is exactly that. That's something else we can keep in mind, that it's time now for us to become a global citizen. So Jim, if you would give us a little more background and insight on that one.
Let me just begin by saying that I totally endorse what Michelle was saying about embracing people, but I feel very strongly about rejecting certain ways of being and acting in the world. Racism needs to be rejected. Nationalism needs to be rejected. Ecocide needs to be rejected. I mean, CIDE, killing the ecosystem needs to be, but I can still love or try to. I have to be honest. I have to try to love someone who embraces those points of view. I think that these last two that we're going to talk about may be my favorite of the bunch, or they pull the others together. And I'm just going to read this little bit of a paragraph. Become a global citizen. Global citizens are cosmopolitans. I have to say that the term cosmopolitan has been used as a derogatory term for centuries. It was standard fare under the old Russian Empire that Jews were denounced as cosmopolitans. And what that meant was that they would never be subjects of the Tsar. They would never be subjects of the Soviet because they owed their allegiance to the world, to the larger world, and therefore they weren't to be trusted. And you hear this all the time from the white nationalist groups, that the enemy our enemies are the globalists, right? The cosmopolitans, because they care about elsewhere. They don't care about home. Well, global citizens are cosmopolitans. That means citizens of the world, of the cosmos. Their world-centric outlook is a powerful antidote to familiar variations of egocentrism. You want to be a world-centrist or an egocentrist. And what are the ugliest forms of egocentrism that are around today? I think they're nationalism, racism, sexism, and I would say intolerance in general. And it's that list, that you gave, Deborah, of my world, my neighborhood, my cares, my concerns, my religion, my country. The true cosmopolitan is not a moral relativist. He or she is not saying, oh, your view is as good as mine. No, you can be wrong. I can be wrong. And it's important that we sort that out. But we're both people who are trying, as you both said, we're trying to find the right way. We're trying to make the world a better place. And that's something we can come together and talk about. What kind of world do we together want? One of the things we learned in pursuing the techniques of interreligious dialogue, when we first started to do this in Chicago and other cities around the world, what we thought was the way to begin was to bring people together and have them talk about their religions and how they differed and so on. So the Hindus need to teach me about Hinduism. And we found out that that was a non-starter. That went nowhere. So instead, we tried to bring people together and say, what are you most concerned about in your neighborhood? What do you want most for your children? And boy, did that ever click. Eventually, might take a few months, they started to say, by the way, what's Hinduism? But you don't start there. Anyway, so this is the same thing. The global citizen, I think this is really important, is the cosmopolitan first and the patriot after. A lot of people don't understand that, but understanding that true citizenship in one's own country or culture is not possible outside the context of full commitment to the planetary community. A globalist serves both. So I really love this one because it isolates what I think are the presenting problems of our time: nationalism, populism, racism, sexism, and intolerance in general, and gives us a real alternative. And if you ask most people and explain it that way, do you want to be and maybe the term citizen confuses some, but would you rather be part of the world, the planet, or have no connection with any of that and only be a citizen of your little town? Nobody's going to say that they want that, or few.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, Deborah, did you want to give some comments now about that?
Yes, I do. The fact is that we are global citizens. That's a fact. It's just a question of how much do we embrace that or do we accept that. No nation exists independently. No nation has its own earth. We are all sharing the same atmosphere, the water, the air. Nations don't have their own planet. That what happens in one part of the world is going to impact whatever it is that's happening in the other part of the world. Even this conversation that we're having right now on this platform called Zoom, it's not contained within a particular nation. Anybody can look around where they are right now, wherever it is that they are sitting, and they will see products and different things that have come in from different parts of the world. We really are a global economy. We are a global technology. There's the big companies that we buy our computers from or our cars from. They're multinational. They don't exist in just one particular nation. It's actually sort of what I was saying before, this idea of separate and independent. We need a different kind of political maturity, a different kind of spiritual maturity that can accept the fact that we're not autonomous. It's almost the adolescent individuation where you want to believe like you have your own life and your own existence, and it's just not true. So I think that if we can accept the complexity that we were talking about earlier and really recognize the fact that this planet belongs to all of us, no nation has control over it, that we have responsibility for the whole thing.
Thanks. Thank you, Michelle.
I really resonate with all this, and I guess the only thing I would add to it is that I've sensed intuitively since I was very young that the more we mix it up in every way, from our DNA to our cultures to our religious beliefs, the more we are inclusive of everything and embrace the diversity, the stronger we are. And the illusion that some operate under is the more we stick with our own, the stronger we are. And everything in our history just simply shows us that is just not the truth of us. Our immune systems are stronger the more we are culturally diverse. Our DNA, the mixture of DNA from different cultures and different backgrounds makes us a stronger human being. And I just sense in every way, shape, or form that our strength comes from embracing our diversity in every level. And so I think that's absolutely, it's the truth.
I absolutely love this final point that you've made. I was surprised to see it because it's one of my favorite words. I learned it from your class many years ago, and ever since I came upon this term, it's filled a need to understand another level of relationship that transcended all my notions of relationship heretofore, and also because I consider you one of my own Kalyana Mitras. So I want us to talk about this. I'd like you to conclude tonight, we've got about 5 minutes left, with this notion you put forth that it's important now that we find our Kalyana Mitras. So explain to us what that means for those who haven't heard the term.
Well, I did my graduate work in history and literature of religions, and with a particular focus on Buddhism. And I have a lot of favorite Sanskrit words, and so it depends on what I'm talking about. I will say, this is my favorite word in Sanskrit, or my favorite Buddhist term. But I think deep down, and Barbara, you know this is Kalyana Mitra is my favorite. And Mitra, it means friend, actually, and you'll hear it in different forms. Never mind, you don't need to know about that. But Kalyana is an adjective that means good and deep and profound and lasting. It means all of those things that we would associate with the term good. So Kalyana Mitra means so much more than, and yet simply, good friend. In Sanskrit, the sacred language, I'm going to read this, of the Buddhist path, Kalyana Mitra means good friend. But in that tradition, it has come to signify much more. Kalyana Mitras are spiritual allies, companions on the evolutionary path, joined by a shared commitment to service to others, things that we've been talking about all the way through this. The companions provide the journey's vital inspiration and energy. The spiritual friend can't be sought out. He or she has a way of happening along when the time is right and the need is real. The trick is to recognize and cherish that person. But more is involved than just finding our own spiritual partners. We also have to learn how to be one. And so as I look around the community that grows up around my constantly churning, evolving, developing intentionality, what we've been calling for shorthand, my vote. When I look around the community that has grown up, or that I've grown up or grown into, not that it has grown up around me, but that I've found myself in, chances are there is at least one or two or three or more Kalyana Mitras, true, deep spiritual friends. And we've been brought together by the challenge of shaping a creative intentionality, honing a good, sharp voting persona in a challenging time. And so it's interesting because they say politics makes strange bedfellows, but Kalyana Mitras make politics work.
Wow. Now there's something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have a discussion about this another time, because now you've got me all ignited with new thoughts, and you know that that's a dangerous thing for me. Okay, so since we're drawing to a close, let me ask Deborah and then Michelle to comment, and then if there are any final remarks, so let's just wrap this up. So Reverend Deborah.
Well, it's absolutely true. When the teacher is ready, the student will appear. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. We're all students and teachers of each other. When you learn, teach. When you get something, share. I would just ask for everyone to think about what is your legacy? What is the impact that you want to make? And really think about voting in a way that maybe you've never thought about it before, because your voice, who you are, makes a really big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for being our teacher today, Jim. Thank you very much for your contribution in this conversation, and for everybody who's listening. It's just powerful to have these kind of conversations and feel the forward momentum of them. So I'm very grateful for this. Thank you.
Well, I should say I feel well and truly taught today. So that's wonderful. I love what you just said there about we're all teachers, we're all learning together. And if I think about, I love this idea of voting. Just let me say one short last thing. What is it when I cast my vote, or when I'm voting all the time? We have all agreed. As I'm voting right now, as I'm intending right now, as I'm choosing right now, what sort of world am I choosing? How am I reaching out to the people that have touched my life most deeply, my Kalyana Mitras? How much am I reaching out to those that I would wish one day to have as Kalyana Mitras that I haven't met yet? So anyway, it was a pleasure to be with you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I have, if we could just have one more minute, one of our attendees that we've worked with before on this program, Jim Taylor, he has his hand up, and I'm going to ask Jim if he'd like to come briefly onto the screen and talk to us for a moment. So let's see if we can make that happen.
You know Jim.
Of course, and he knows you. He's a big fan of yours. Hi, Jim.
There we go. I just want to say thank you to everyone. One very important point for me about New Thought is it gave me a justification for something that I did kind of unconsciously. For 45 years, I've lived in states in which my presidential vote never made the difference in terms of how the vote went. But I have always felt, and I have never missed a vote ever, that symbolically, it was very important, that it was far more than the numerical weight of my single vote, that my act of consciousness in voting was important.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for talking about this important topic to us all. Love your work, our work.
Thanks, Jim. Good to hear you again.
Really nice to hear from you, and we'll talk soon.
Yes.
So I'm thinking that wraps up just about on time our program tonight, which I completely and totally enjoyed and feel energized by. And I'll let you all know, you'll all receive information tomorrow about the recording. And so will everybody who was absent tonight too. We usually get more hits on the recording than we do in the live seminar for various reasons. But I'll send those links to you, make sure that all of our panelists have it as well.
Thank you.
And that
Please,
you can have access to that recording to share as you will.
Thank you.
So, Jim, thank you so much. Good to see you.
You too, Barbara and Deborah and Michelle.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.